Hi, I'm Darlene Gannon with the Fortinet Communications team, and with me today is Tony Giandomenico from the FortiGuard Labs Global Threat Research team. How's it going, Tony?
It's going fantastic. How are you?
Great, nice to see you. So today we're going to be talking about the trends and key takeaways from our Global Threat Landscape Report. So Tony, talk to me about the research. There are lots of reports out there. What really makes Fortinet's different, and what data are we really tracking?
Yeah. Our Global Threat Landscape Report is something that we do on a quarterly basis, and it's really derived from the information we're getting from over 3 million sensors that are deployed worldwide in a production environment. What we're really looking at is trying to identify the top threats. Specifically, we're looking at application exploits, we're looking at malicious software, as well as top botnets. And we'll provide a global, a regional, and an industry view or perspective into that data. And what we're trying to do ultimately with the report is identify different types of trends that might help us figure out where we should be focusing our efforts when we come to building our cybersecurity programs.
So what at a high level did we find in this report, and what is the data really telling us?
Well, at a high level, what we found in the report is that the threat landscape is it's continuing to increase, right? We have organizations that continue to adopt virtualization technology like virtual private data centers.
Right.
They're moving to the cloud. They're starting to adopt more and more of the IoT devices, and they're starting to see, well, we're starting to see more of these smart devices being able to connect, to the network. And what this means is the increased overall potential of attack vectors that the adversaries can take advantage of. And Darlene, the thing that actually bothers me the most, I think as this infrastructure starts to expand, I think we're losing visibility and control into that expanding infrastructure. You add to that the adversaries, specifically within the cybercrime ecosystem, they're going to be able to take advantage of that, and I think the success rate of them being able to penetrate the networks is going to be much higher. Now, the other thing that we saw that I thought was kind of interesting is this threat problem. It's really a global problem. What we've seen is a lot of the same attack vectors were across all regions as well as all industries. So me as a CISO, typically I would want to build my relationships, my partnerships with my peers in my industry and in my region, but I think what this data shows, at the same time, I would also benefit from building relationships with my peers outside of the regions or the industry that I currently work in.
So I'm sure when you're talking to your peers and customers all the time, you get this: what is the biggest threat that my organization is facing today?
100% accurate. I get that all the time. What's the biggest threat to my organization? And oftentimes I think what they're waiting for me to say is that latest threat that maybe made the news. Like, for example, WannaCry.
Right.
It was recently in the news a couple weeks ago. But that's, in my mind, that's not the biggest threat. The biggest threat really comes from the maturing of the cybercrime ecosystem. It's the affiliate program where Tom, Dick, and Harry can get into a life of cybercrime, and what they can do is leverage the automation and the sophistication of those hacking tools, right? Because when they do that, that's going to increase the attack volume. The volume's high now. It's only going to get higher, which means that window of opportunity that organizations have to be able to defend against those types of attacks is going to drastically reduce over time. So in my mind, that's the biggest threat to organizations today.
So our report offers insights on threats against both a backdrop of technology, infrastructure, and industry sector trends. So why is it important for us to look at both to truly understand the threat landscape and its implications?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of those trends are interconnected. And what I mean by that, if we look at the threat trends, it's really a reflection of the environment that they occur in. So if we can start to understand that environment and those trends within the environment, like the applications being leveraged, the technology being used, that's valuable information for us to use moving forward.
Right. So talk to me about some of these key trends that we found in this report.
Well, there's actually 3 of them. So the first one is really more and more organizations. We're seeing HTTPS or SSL. So the communications that we're seeing is encrypted, which from a privacy perspective, that's great.
Right.
However, from a security perspective, we don't have visibility into that particular communication channel, which we don't know if that particular channel is malicious or not. Adding to that, the adversaries are using encrypted communications more and more as well. So that just adds to the problem. So the second one also is we're seeing an increase in cloud applications. In this particular report, we saw 62, which is roughly about 1/3 of all of the applications. And like I said before, as you start using more and more of these cloud apps, your data is going to reside in the cloud. Your users are going to be, manipulating that data, and I think you start to lose visibility to what's happening to that data and what your users end up doing in the cloud. And then lastly, we're able to glean from our cluster analysis that a lot of the attack surface is shared across all the industries. Now, there are some outliers. We had the education industry and the telco industry. This is slightly different. However, the rest of the industries shared that same attack surface. And what that means is those bad guys are going to be able to leverage those automated tools across the entire attack surface across all those industries a lot easier than they would if they were different.
So Tony, can you summarize some key takeaways for CISOs and security leaders in terms of maybe some potential best next steps or best practices as they digest all this great threat data?
Sure. There's a lot of really good information that we have in the report, but I would say Muhammad Ali said it best. The hands can't hit what the eyes can't see.
Right.
We need to have visibility into the assets that we're responsible for securing. And I think it goes back to just the basics, making sure that we reduce the attack surface, having good vulnerability and patch management process, but equally as important is making sure we understand how those assets are communicating with each other. And ultimately, that's understanding the topology. Now, it used to be easy, but as we start to adopt these virtualization technologies, we have private data centers we're moving towards, they're moving into the cloud. It's becoming more and more difficult to understand that topology. So I would think for CISOs, focus on those assets and focus on that expanding infrastructure and what does that topology look like? How does the actual data flow through that environment? And then also equally as important also is making sure that at least have a high level of understanding of the threats that may be targeting your organization. Now, I feel like that's the first phase. That's what I refer to as having situational awareness. Now, now you have to figure out, when I go back to that actual question you asked me about the biggest threat.
Right.
I think the biggest threat, you need to figure out how do you combat that automation in that cybercrime ecosystem. And I think you combat that with automation as well, right? It's automation versus automation, meaning you need to start getting your technology controls working together, being able to communicate together across all the attack vectors. If you can do that, now you start letting the actual technology make some automated decisions for you. Now, maybe they're not going to, remove the actual threat, but what they will do is once they detect, they'll help you be able to contain or isolate the breach, give your incident response folks a time to fight through the attack. Because remember earlier on I said that volume is going to make your window of opportunity to be able to respond start to shrink. Well, when you have that early automation, it expands that window a bit more and gives you more time to fight through the attack. So those are the things that I would probably leave as parting thoughts for the CISO. Have a lot better visibility into understanding what your environment is, but at the same time acting on it and making sure that you're leveraging your technology to make some automated decisions for you.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for all of your great insights and your time, Tony. I really look forward to our future conversations around our global threat reports.
As do I.